Are we gonna get to be okay? I want to make sure we hit record before we get going here. All right, wonderful. Well, thank you. I kind of gave a little bit of a preview about some of the things in my introduction. We'll start with the very factual stuff. I grew up in Indiana, went to Purdue to pursue chemical engineering, part of the Alpha chapter there. Absolutely phenomenal part of my life, and look back on that very fondly. Graduated graduated in 2009. I actually graduated in 2009 and didn't end up having a job after college, and that was like I think my first place where I started like soul searching about like who I am and what am I doing and why am I doing this and where am I going. So that will kind of come into play a little bit later as we start to talk, because like I didn't know I was going through that at the time, but now that I can look back at it and I can see that. And I then did get a job with a company. I worked in Indianapolis area, worked in California. They brought me here to Cleveland. When I came to Cleveland, I was engaged to my husband. He graduated from college and we got married. He followed me here. So we've been married, will be in October for 10 years. And we have a 5-year-old little daughter. Her name's Valerie. She's the absolute joy of my life most of the time. Most of the time. um, and so yeah, so that's a little bit of the like background of me. So I spent 10 years working as chemical engineer, and I did all of the things that I thought I was supposed to do. I just kept working my way up that corporate ladder, and I always remember having kind of these feelings of like, is this it? Like, is this everything? Because it just never quite would fulfill what I wanted in my life. And what I started to do is really just keep job jumping, if you will. I'd be like, okay, well, maybe it's just because I'm already ready for the next promotion. And I would get the next promotion. And then I'd be like, okay, this still doesn't quite feel right. Like, what is going on? And there was just this mismatch of like I didn't feel comfortable. I didn't feel like me. I didn't feel this, like I was feeling this misalignment. And the last time that happened, I actually was pregnant with my daughter. They called me in. I got interview for this promotion when I think I interviewed for it like 2 weeks before I was due to have my daughter. And I came back from maternity leave into this new role. It was quite overwhelming for me. And not to say that that's everybody's experience, because I know some people that handle it really well, but I had already had been having this internal struggle about who I am. Am I on the right path? Like, why doesn't this feel right? And then I added a little one into the mix, and that just made it even more so. So I'm getting to the point where I was so frustrated. I was burnt out. I didn't know why I was feeling this way, because I'd been so passionate about being an engineer and like loving like a lot of the problem solving and those kind of things that were in being an engineer. But I was burnt out and I could not do it anymore. I ended up walking away from my career in September of 2019. I also always say I must have had some people really really watching out for me up here or something, because if we analyze the situation in March of 2020, which we all know what happened then, I probably would have been forced to do that, or my husband would have been, based on childcare situations and all that kind of stuff. So I just did it 6 months early. That's what I've been saying to people now. I just took care of that decision 6 months early and didn't really realize that's what I was doing. But when I left that, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I was like, am I going to be a stay-at-home mom? That didn't really work very well for me, because I was like, after a little while, I was like, okay, give me something. I gotta do something. I need to. I'd always been driven to help people. That's where I got into engineering in the first place. So just happened to be on Instagram, developing a relationship with this woman that I met that lived in California, and I had no like rhyme and reason other than I like she was really cool. I thought she was what she did was cool. She did personal styling and celebrity styling, and I've always loved clothes and fashion, and we got to talking, and she runs a heart-centered styling school to teach other women to be personal stylists. And I couldn't tell you other than it was just gut intuition that I was like, hey, I have got to take this course. You know, I got to do this training. I don't know why. I don't know what my plan is. I don't know what I want to do. I didn't really have the idea that I was going to necessarily open up a business around it when I took this course, but I was like, I got to take it. And I did that, and it opened up this entire new world for me. And what I started to realize is the reason I was feeling so burnt out, the reason that I was feeling like, okay, is this it? What is going on when I was in my career was that I wasn't being true to myself. I had compartmentalized my life so much that I had a professional bubble, that this is how I acted when I was in a professional space. And it was very much related to being, you know, in that perfectionism, being in that people pleasing. Like I was the yes girl. You could always come to me, you could always do that. And then I had my personal life. And my personal life, I was a different, I was a different person. I could let go a little bit more. I could be myself a little bit more. So much so that even if any of you guys have known me for a little while, which I know some people that I've known in this room, or if you're watching the recording, that I've known for quite a while, all the way through college, I was Missy. That was the nickname that I was given from the time I was born. My parents literally named me Melissa with the intent of calling me Missy, and that was that. And I kept that through college. When I went then though into the workplace, I was like, ooh, like nobody's gonna take me seriously if I walk in being a woman with my blonde hair and say, hi, my name's Missy. I was like, nobody's gonna take me seriously. And that's where like that really like divide, I think, started, that I wasn't bringing my whole self to what I was doing. I was separating it. And so I had actually kind of gotten to the point that even in social circles, there's still social circles in Cleveland. There are people that I have kind of drifted apart from now that probably would still tell you that I'm Melissa Baker, because it just started to kind of bleed into that, because it was really confusing for a long time to try to remember, like, okay, in this circle I introduced myself as Missy, and in this circle I introduced myself as Melissa. And so like it kind of all got convoluted. So tell you all of that to say, what does this have to do with clothes and how we are dressing ourselves? So the title of this presentation is Dress to Empower and Unveiling Your True Self. So why does the clothes that we wear matter, and what does it have to do with our identity? The first thing that I will share with you all is we get dressed every single day. I don't care what we're doing, we're putting clothes on our body. And whether you realize it or not, the clothes that you're putting on affect how you present yourself in the world. They affect your mood, how you feel about yourself. And I know you've all experienced it, even if you didn't quite realize that was what was going on. You may like, you put on a certain outfit when you're like, yeah, I know I have a big presentation at work today, or I have something I really got to knock out of the park. I'm going to put this on because it makes me feel powerful. It makes me feel confident, you know, whatever that feeling is for you. And then we also know, like, on the days that we're like, feel very good, I'm not going to like, I want to get dressed. And you're putting on like the sweat. And I mean, there's a place for that. Don't get me wrong, but you're putting on the sweats, you're putting on the t-shirt, and you're like, it doesn't necessarily always help you make you feel better. It kind of almost reiterates that, like, you know, I'm in a grumpy mood and I'm putting these clothes on and I just feel ugh. And we've also all had the times where, you know, just getting dressed, taking a shower, washing your hair. You guys are like, I feel like I should note that you guys are really lucky. You got me to wash my hair and dry my hair on a Sunday for you guys, because like usually that's a Monday thing, but I was like, we're gonna wash and dry my hair today. So you guys got a real treat for that. Um, but so it's something that we do every single day. It's part of the energy that we hold. It's part of the energy that we project when we walk into the room. You've all either been that person or you've seen that person when they like walk in the room. They don't have to say anything. They just command that attention. How you dress is such a part of that, but it's not in the way that we think. Like it's less about what everybody else thinks and it's how it is affecting your energy. And so for so long, clothes, I mean, raise your hand if you ever felt like you had to, especially I'm talking way back, like, well, at least for maybe some of us, way back, like high school age, middle school age, whatever, where you're like, you were dressing in things to try to impress other people. Like, I feel like, yeah, everybody can relate to that, right? And that was that external motivation. I've got to dress to impress everybody else. And that's exactly why I didn't call this presentation Dress to Impress. Dress to empower, because it's about what you do here and how it affects you. And then some people love it and some people hate it, and that's okay. Like that part is absolutely fine. It's really great when we feel good and somebody gives us a compliment and we can look at that as an affirmation of what we already know versus when we're like, oh, I'm not sure. Like, and then we're like, oh, Ava gave me this great compliment today. And now I feel really good because Ava gave me that compliment. When we're running off of that, we're running off of all of that external motivation. So we're going to dive in here. Also, I forgot to say this at the beginning, but if you guys have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, or if you want to like raise your hand, and Ava, if you can kind of help me moderate that if somebody's got like a burning question, because I'm not seeing everybody right now, please feel free to stop me and we can stop in that moment and have that conversation right then. Of course, we'll have some time at the end too, but I've got some notes here so that I won't get too far off track. So please feel free to ask questions, or if you've got a comment, if you've got a burning comment and you're like, I gotta say this, like please, please, please do that. So how do we start to change the narrative for ourselves around how we feel when we get dressed? One of the biggest foundations of that is how we feel about our bodies. Those two things are so intertwined. Like you can't untangle them completely, no matter how hard you try, because we have bodies, we're all in these physical bodies, and then we're putting clothes on these physical bodies. And we've heard things from so many years about, don't wear this, wear this, this is slimming, this is this. They're like, if you're a certain size, you shouldn't wear this. Like we've heard it all. And so when we start to talk about how you're going to start to dress more authentically, the first place we always have to start is, how are we going to build a foundation of self-acceptance and self-love? And I always like to start with the term acceptance, because sometimes if you are in that pit of a place where you're like, I just really have a lot of shame and guilt and self-hatred around your body, reaching for that like term self-love feels really hard, because it is. You're trying to kind of almost jump a ton of emotions. Like there's a hierarchy of emotions that we feel, and you're trying to jump from way down here all the way up to here. So getting to that like kind of acceptance, that neutrality place first before we go into love is always really helpful if that doesn't feel good. Like if self-love is like just gives you the feeling, try putting in that neutrality or self-acceptance and getting to the place where you can just be okay with things where they are. You don't have to love it, but you can just say, you know what, I accept this. This is the way it is. You can use a little bit of that engineering background to help you with that, right? We know when we look at a math problem, like this is the way the math problem is. It's just the way it is. Like this is how you do it. This is the answer. Start to look at your body the same way, being able to really build that foundation, because when you don't have that foundation, it's really, really hard to start to build in an authentic way if you're still sitting there and looking at yourself in the mirror and feeling so much shame and guilt around that. So ways to start doing that, there's all kinds of different ways to start your acceptance journey. For me, mine started with food actually, and it was really coming to peace for me with food, and worked with an intuitive eating dietitian. Did a lot of great work there on starting to bring neutrality to my food of good and bad. And when I started to take away the morality from my food choices, I started to be able to make decisions for myself that made me feel good versus what I thought was good and bad. And I could do a whole talk on just that, so I don't want to get too much into the details of all of that. If you have questions about those more specifics, please let me know. But what I found through doing that, doing that acceptance journey of food first for me, because that was my go-to. Like that was my go-to. I felt bad about my body and I would restrict my food. And then I would get to a point that I'd restricted too much and then I would binge. And then I would feel worse about myself and worse about my body. And it was like this cycle that repeated over and over and over again. So once I was kind of able to pull the plug on that cycle, it just changed the game for me completely. Now, that didn't come without some body changes. I did go quite up in weight, and now I'm kind of back on this like downhill from that. And the amount of ability to be okay with that just has floored me as somebody that's always been so entwined with the number on the scale. Like I will tell you, the stuff like when you start to figure out why you behave the way that you do and realize like, oh, like my food was my method of like shaming myself, and start to take that away, it is amazing what can happen. Like I can have Oreos. In fact, I do. Well, unless my daughter ate them all. I don't know. She's an Oreo fiend, but I can have them in my cabinet now, and I don't sit there and binge them all. I can have one. I get maybe one or two out of a pack before she and my husband finish them. They eat them faster than I do. But things like that. And so just coming to that place where for me it was started with food and then that trickled over to my body of like, you know what? That number that's on the scale was just a number. And then it got to a point where I was like, well, I don't really need to check in with that. So I got rid of the scale. I don't have a scale in my house. Like I just don't pay attention to that. I pay attention to how I feel. And it allows you to tap into taking away the rules of everything and tap into what makes me feel good. What do I want to do in this day? Because at some point, like if I gave you the choice, I'm going to keep going on this food example. If I gave you the choice to keep doing the same thing every single day, eventually you're going to get bored of it. Like if you're going to eat ice cream for every single meal, like sure, that sounds really great at the beginning. But when you're tuning into your intuition and like who you are and what you desire to feel, like eventually, like after a few meals, you're gonna be like, okay, I gotta have something else. Like this does not feel good anymore. And so that's what the power of acceptance is. Acceptance is like looking at this is the way that it is. And I can either accept that here in the moment, or I can be stuck in the past of like, well, I used to be like this and I want to go back there, or stuck in the future of, oh my gosh, well, I just have to get to here. And if I get to here, then I'll be happy, which that's also never true. Like, if you're not happy here, you won't be happy when you get here or here, 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 here. So finding that place of self-acceptance, and then that self-acceptance can start to turn into acts of self-love. Like you can take that acceptance, you can take that neutrality, and then all of a sudden as you keep practicing, you realize like, oh no, I actually can look in the mirror and be like, dang, you look good today. Like you're awesome. Like I love that. And it just starts to happen over time as you practice that intentionality. So once you have built that foundation of self-acceptance, of self-love, the next thing is really being able then to connect, and you can fill in the blank here with how you want to talk about this, your next level self, your higher self, a soul level connection. Like all of those things are interchangeable really, but we're talking about the soul essence of who you are, and uncovering that, because we're not creating something new. Like each and every one of you listening to this call has that beautiful soul essence, that essence of who you are, it's already there. So we're not creating something new. We're just kind of, I don't like the onion analogy, but it works so well in this, that we're peeling back some of those layers, some of those walls that we've built up over many years for the fact that we needed to protect ourselves, and you're uncovering who you are. And so connecting on that, like ways that you can do that is really to just start to, my favorite exercise to do this, and I don't know if we have time to do this now, but it's definitely something I can put for you guys to take some time to do, is think about the goals you have. Like we're a little more than halfway over the year. But think about the person that has achieved the goals or intentions, or however it works for you, that you had for this year. And you can start to then visualize that version of you that's already achieved those things. Like it's already done. And when you start to be able to bring a visual image of that version of you in, you'll start to notice things that are different about that person, how she carries herself, how, you know, dressing is a big part of that. That's what I focus on when I work with clients, is how that version of them is dressing themselves. But also you might notice different habits, different routines, different things that just is in the essence of them. And that's connecting to that higher self, that next level self. And, I do that entire visualization process with clients, and it's so cool to see. Somebody that I worked with real recently was very much always in like neutral colors. She was just playing very, very like, nobody look at me, I'm going to be a little bit smaller. And we did her visualization, and the visualization exercise that I do with my clients is probably about, the actual visualization is probably about like a 30-minute exercise that we do together. And she saw this woman that was in these beautiful suits, multiple different colors, like pinks and reds, and really vibrant. And we brought some of that to life. And when she sends me stuff and pictures now, she's like, I didn't know I was a person that loved having these real statement pieces and these real statement things. But she's like, but I am, and I absolutely love it. And I feel so free. And that was such a beautiful witness, because that's what this is about. When you start to connect in and peel back that layer, or layers that have been protecting who you are, and then you start to show up that way, that is freedom to get to be who you are. And then I've reflected back, like when I was compartmentalizing, like I was telling you guys about, I wasn't being who I was when I was at work. When I was going into that, career space, I was like, okay, I am very perfect Melissa that does everything and says yes to everybody and gets everything done. And I wasn't allowing space to bring in my personality, to bring in Missy, to bring in who I was, to bring in like the fun element, because it's like, I got to be serious to be taken seriously in this role. And I know that contributed to the burnout feeling that I had, is because I wasn't allowing myself to be free. So that connection and that little exercise, I'm going to send you guys some stuff with that. I will make sure that exercise is in there if you guys want to try that on your own, of just sitting back, closing your eyes, taking some time to have that, visualize, meditative space. Or if it feels better with you, like write. I know some people are more like writers than they are like visualizers. That's okay too. But connecting with that version of you that already has that thing that you're desiring, that you're working towards, and how she shows up. So that's the first piece on embracing your authenticity. The other piece of that is we can do all of that work and we can sit at home and we can do it if we feel really good about it. But if we don't have the confidence piece to go with it, it can be really hard to then bring that part into into the world and outside the door, where it's really going to make a difference of you doing this. Because like, it doesn't really matter if you're not going to go out into the world presenting as this person. So what do we do to start to cultivate that confidence and build self-esteem? So once you've got that foundation of the acceptance with yourself, you can start to figure out how to build this. And I think one of the big things we always hear when we hear about confidence is fake it till you make it. Like we've all heard that, right? Like that's such a common thing. And I understand where the intention of that comes from. And at the same time, we can't trick ourselves. We can't trick God. We can't trick the universe, source, how, whatever, fill in whatever word you want to put in there. Like don't get hung up on the word, but we can't trick ourselves. So like that's why it always feels a little weird when you're like, okay, like I don't feel very confident, but I'm just gonna go in there and I'm gonna act like I'm confident. And then you still have that voice that's like, yeah, this isn't real. Everybody can see through this. And you kind of get like almost you would call that imposter syndrome of like, everybody can see through this. Like they all know that I'm faking it, even though most people can't, but you still got that voice there. And so what I really have found is a much better approach in building confidence is showing up and doing the things that you said that you were going to do when you said that you were going to do them. And I know that sounds so simple, but it is one of the hardest things I think that we can do. And that's because there's several keys with that. A, you've got to have things that are aligned that you're going to say that you're going to do, and you have to do them in bite-sized pieces. Like we can't say all of a sudden that, okay, well, I'm just going to start doing all of these new things all at once. And then when we fail, we feel horrible about ourselves, right? It's because we didn't do what we said we were going to do when we said we were going to do it. But it's because we took too much off at once. Like we bit off more than we could chew. So really getting into that simple practice of saying, you know what, this week, I'm just going to commit to setting my alarm for 10 minutes earlier. Or I'm going to commit that, you know what, I'm going to spend 5 minutes doing meditation or journaling, or I'm going to spend 5 minutes reading my book. Like that's something that I'm working on right now. Like I spent so much time reading personal development books, and I'm like, dang, I used to love reading. Like I used to love getting lost in a good story. And so it's been a challenge for me. So one of the things that I'm working on is spending 10 minutes in the end of the evening, 10 minutes, that's it, reading my book. And so doing those small habits, and that helps cultivate confidence so much more than trying to just fake that you have this confidence and hoping that it's going to come along. And so then how that ties in with the clothes is once you start to figure out like, okay, like actually the higher version of myself, she wears more color. I'm going to pick on that one because like I feel like that one is such and I'm looking at Christine here with her tie-dye shirt and I'm like, yes, I love that. But color is like something that so many, like that's one of the big common threads that I find that people are so afraid of. Well, why are we afraid of it? Well, when I'm wearing color, people are looking at me. Like people are going to be looking at me. And so building confidence around that is be like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it. Like we can do a lot of the work behind the scenes, but sometimes you also have to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to put on this pink sweater. I'm going to wear this bright lipstick. I'm going to wear whatever. And you say, you know what, I'm going to do? I'm going to challenge myself to do that this week, one time. And then you do it. And then you're like, oh, well, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Because it's never as bad as we build it up in our mind to be like, and the happy part of that is you might actually get a like, oh, well, that's really different. You look good. Like you might start to get that. I've had that with clients before where they're like, yeah, my boss noticed. Like I was sitting in a meeting and my boss noticed that I was wearing pink and I wasn't wearing my normal like black. And they're like, wow, you look really happy today. Like you've got that, that color. So that's where you can start to build the confidence. And that is really literally just doing it, saying you're going to do it, making a goal for it, and just doing it. And then when you're doing all of those other habit things along the way with it, that confidence in other areas starts to build, and it just builds and feeds off of itself as you go along. So you've got that authenticity, and then now you have to have that confidence to actually bring it out into the world. So it's a little bit working on the habits, doing what you say you're going to do, combined with sometimes just got to do it. Just got to do it, and well, you'll always find that it's going to be better than you thought it was going to be in your head. And that then brings me into really breaking this conformity that we all seem to feel like we have to fit into these certain boxes to be able to be successful. There's a certain path. You might have picked up on that when I talked about that in my story for me. I was going along this path that I thought, like, this is the way I'm supposed to do it. This is exactly the right path. That path works for people. Like, that works for some people, and that is okay. And it's okay if it doesn't work for you. And like, it's about figuring out what works for you. And once you've got that self-acceptance, once you've kind of started to work on building on that confidence, that's when you can start to like look around and be like, okay, well, where am I like staying inside these lines that doesn't feel good to me? And the best way that I can start to tell you to break out of that is starting to define things for yourself. So when we talk about dress for success, there is a vision in my head from when I was taught when I was little, as far as showing up and dressing in a certain way to be successful. Well, you wore your black business suit that, you know, is the same suit that you've worn forever, with very, you know, very neutral clothes, and you were very just put together. And it was like, it was this exactly this, like, very neutral, don't draw any attention to yourself. And that was what being successful was, like, as far as the dressing part of it. But then being successful also has a lot of other connotations to it, as far as what kind of money you're going to make, what kind of job that you're going to have, what does your house look like? There's all of these things that are kind of this very generic, what does success look like? So how you can start to break apart from that is pull out a journal, spend some time with yourself, and define these things for yourself. So what does success look like for you? Does it look like having the career and having all of the promotions? Or does it look like, you know what, I'm going to get really good at this one thing. I don't care if I keep promoting up in the company. I want to be really good at this thing. Like, I love this job. I want to be really good at this. Does it look like doing something non-traditional? Maybe you don't want to have a house. Maybe you would rather have a remote job and have more of a digital nomad style, you know, life. Like, all of those things, like, it's so different for each and every one of us. And so when you start to say, you know what, I'm going to define what success means for me, then that gives you a more accurate measuring stick than trying to measure against everybody else. You can do the same thing of what does it mean to me to dress for success? And so for me, that definition has changed into making sure that I'm showing up in a way that feels like me. Now, obviously, for what I do, how I dress is kind of like a big billboard for being a personal stylist, but you get to define that for yourself too. So maybe if you are in a place where you're wearing more professional clothes, it's, well, yeah, I'm going to wear the professional clothes, but I'm going to bring in color, or I'm going to bring in pattern, or I'm going to bring in funky shoes or funky socks, or like things that make you feel like you. So what does that definition of dressing for success mean for you? What does defining luxury? Luxury is one that kind of is a taboo topic to start talking about. But what does luxury mean to you? Luxury might not mean for you that you're buying tons of designer brands and you have all of these really expensive things. Luxury for you might be that you've got time to sit in the backyard and play with your kids, or read a book with your dog, or, you know, you've got access to nature close by so that you can go and take, nature hikes. Luxury can mean so many different things. And then I've kind of already given you my definition of confidence, but go back and define what confidence means for you. You can take and build on what I've given you, but define what that means for you. So, really, in that piece is really starting to think outside of the box. Where are these places where you feel like you're coloring with inside the lines and you don't want to be anymore? You want to be able to be outside of that box. And so, those definitions can really start to help you figure out, well, what am I measuring against? And then you might be able to look at things that you're already doing and say, okay, well, like actually in this area, I actually feel like I am much more successful than I realized that I was, because I was measuring against the world's definition and not my definition. And then if you're finding places where you're like, yeah, no, I'm not showing up like this. I'm showing up like I wear the same thing that everybody else wears. And then there's things you can do about that to break out of that. But we can only do it once we're aware that it's an issue. And so I want to bring this home then with the last piece, which is unveiling your true self. So unveiling your true self is this true embodiment of doing all of this work to figure out who you are, where you're going, how you want to show up in the world, and then bringing that vision to life. Because if we do all the work, I've done this before, actually. Share this story real quick. I did branding stuff for my business about like a year and a half ago. And it was all of these like questions and this like journaling. I spent a ton of time on it. It was like all of these questions to go through, all of the stuff. And I did it all. And I was like, cool, check, 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 check. I did it. It lived in my computer and I never looked at it again. It was doing me no good. But that was where like kind of the like checklist mentality was like, well, I did it all. And I have a very good mentor that like, I think this was like 3 or 4 months ago now. She's like, so well, how are you using that? And I was like, well, what do you mean? How am I using that? She's like, well, like, how is that informing what you're posting on your social media? How is that informing with how you're showing up? How's that informing with the newsletters that you're sending, what you're talking to people about? And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, what have you been doing with that? I was like, it's a file in my computer. I did the exercises. And she's like, okay, like, let's bring it out, let's revisit it, and then let's figure out how you actually wrap that into the stuff that you're doing to put out. And the same thing is true for all of these things that I've talked about in the exercises here. If they become the checklist of all the things that you do, and then you put it on the shelf and you go, okay, I did the exercises, it doesn't do you any good. And that's a hard one. Like, that's a hard one because, like, I think, we want to be like, well, I did the work. But the real work is then taking that and implementing it into that physical space. So showing up, I've kind of talked about that already a little bit. Showing up and actually wearing the outfits, showing up in the way that you want to. Maybe it's also, you want to be more assertive in holding your boundaries at work. And so that might mean, hey, like raising your hand and saying something in a meeting, bringing that, those ideas, allowing yourself to bring some of your like inappropriate ways. I feel like that word kind of, bringing who you are to your workplace, and saying, like, letting people in and seeing a little bit of what really makes you even when you're in a professional setting, because you can bring that in, and it's like not, you can bring that in a way that is both professional but also lets people know, like, hey, you're a real person. Like, you're a real person. And not only does that help with everybody that is interacting around you and how you feel, it's going to help you continue to feel good in what you're doing instead of compartmentalizing and burning out. So it all sounds well and good in theory, but what are the things that prevent you from actually being able to bring that through into your life? And here's some things that I want you to watch out for in your brain. Might be hearing something that's like, well, yeah, I like that, but I could never do that in public. Or, ooh, but that would bring a lot of attention, and I don't know if I want people looking at me. Or this one goes back to that, like some of that body stuff we were talking about in the beginning. I need to change XYZ before I could actually like wear that. Or the very classic, but what will people say? And the common thing with all of these things is these are all based in fear. Now, nothing is going wrong. Like if you're having those thoughts, like you're not a bad person, nothing's gone wrong. They're very human thoughts. It's just actually our brain and our ego's way of trying to keep us safe, right? Like trying to keep us in that little comfort zone. So it's like, okay, nobody's going to look at us. But for us to really unveil who we are, we have that piece of vulnerability. We have that piece of kind of stepping out and being like, no, world, this is who I am. And so, how do you handle those? You start to look at them as deeper clues because that's all they really are. If you're saying, ooh, but what would people say? There's probably experiences in your past, probably when you were a child, although it doesn't have to be limited to when you were a child, that you did do something like that and you had a bad experience where people did laugh at you. They made fun of you to your face or behind your back or both. And then you're like, oh, okay, well, if I show that part of myself, then that's what's going to happen again. So looking at those and being able to say, you know what, actually, I know that that happened to me when I was in third grade, but it's going to be okay now. Like it's going to be okay. And coming to terms with like, you know what, I'm okay if people say things about me. I'm okay if other people think I'm weird. I'm okay being who I am because it's more important to you to bring forth that true version of yourself than what other people are thinking about you. And then, you know, on the other side of it, sometimes you just got to rip the band-aid off. You just got to do it and be like, you know what, we're going to let it fly. We're just going to go. We're just going to go. So you kind of have both. And the reason I say that is because I have been the person that lets that first one of like, oh, I need to do deeper healing on that be the thing that holds me back from going wee and just going. Because I'm like, oh, but I could do more healing. But I could do more healing on that. I could go to the next layer of that. So it's a balance. It's always a balance of giving yourself that like healing and like looking at those as clues and then knowing when it's time to just be like, we gotta go. Like, let's fly. And it doesn't have to happen all at once. You can do it in one aspect of your life and one little way and try it out. And then you build it into something else. And that's where, you know, I really talk about, you know, I'm sorry if you got on here thinking that we were talking about like a lot of style tips and all of those kind of things, because that is not, I think we did a pretty good job of communicating, you know, of communicating that. But the style gets to be like, that's the fun medium that I play in with women to help go through this process is using clothes as a vehicle to really get deeper about knowing who we are and then showing up as that version in the world. But you can choose other vehicles too. You know, you can choose other areas of your life. I mean, popular ones are people work on their money mindset, and that changes how they see everything else. So they're playing in that space of money, or they work in physical health, whether it's nutrition or like exercise and that kind of stuff. And they work on this stuff and that. And what I've noticed by starting with the clothes and that trickled over into the food and like then back into clothes and then into exercise. And then now we're working on money stuff. And the more things that I do on working on that, they're all related. They're all related. It's about what vehicle you want to choose to start. So it can feel a little bit overwhelming until you kind of narrow down and be like, you know what, I'm just gonna work on this. I'm gonna work on figuring out how to be myself in this area. And then once I do it in this area, then I can see how I can kind of copy paste into other areas of my life. So at this point, I realized at the very beginning, well, number one, hopefully my headphones don't die. If they do, I'll take them off and hopefully the audio will be okay because they're beeping at me. But I realized I never really told you guys anything about actually what I do with my business. So I'm going to take a few minutes to do that because I didn't even tell you what the name of my business was. Like I just dove right in. but give you a few ways to contact me, and then I'll open it up for any questions, discussion, anything that you guys want to do there. But so the business that I own, after hearing this presentation, probably make a lot of sense. It's called Soul to Style. So that is really capturing the essence of what I do with every client that I work with. I help them figure out who they are and then use that to inform how they want to show up in the world, how they want to dress. We do go through and work on the body confidence issues, the self-acceptance issues. It's different with every person, and yet at the same time, it's all the same. And so I work with clients on this very unique process where we look inward first. We do some of that visualization, we do that self-acceptance work, and then we dive into, oh boy, can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, they died, but we can still hear you.
Okay. Let me just make sure these are disconnected. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Technology. What was I saying? Yes. So we build on figuring out who you are first. And then in this signature process that I do, then we turn that into, well, what does that look like in the physical? Do style vision board. And then we cleanse the closet. Like cleansing the closet is one of the, like, if you do nothing else, figuring out how to cleanse your closet and get rid of the things that don't fit and don't align with you anymore, that just like that in itself is a huge, huge, both physical and energetic shift, because you're in your closet every single day, because you're getting dressed every single day. But we do that. We do shopping, which that can also be a interesting hurdle for people. Like I always grew up loving shopping, even though I didn't like some elements of shopping, but I know a lot of people don't like going out and shopping, and that dressing room can feel kind of scary. So we go through and we do that. And we do that together. Christine, I get to channel you. I feel like I'm the dressing room cheerleader, but you don't have pom-poms yet. Maybe I should get some though. But helping that, and then coming back to that embodiment is the last part of the process that I do, where then it's like the integration of, okay, I've got all of these new things. I've got stuff that was left in my closet. How do I put these together? We do style lookbooks with that, and we do those kind of things. So it's a transformational process that I help women go from feeling stuck, feeling like they know there's something like missing. They know that they're ready to show up in a different way. If that life feels a little bit out of alignment, and they're struggling to get dressed every day, or they are getting dressed, but it just doesn't feel good. Because that should be a fun part of the day, to get dressed and to be able to put things on and have fun and creativity and being able to play in that space. And it's a drag. They're getting dressed and they're leaving a pile of like 6 or 7 things beside them that they've tried on, and we're like, nope, that doesn't work. Nope, that doesn't work. Nope, that doesn't feel good. And finally settling on something that just feels like meh, and then walking out the door, and then their day feels meh. And we change that to where it's easy to get dressed in the morning. It feels fun going out into the world, feeling like you. And then, I mean, as cheesy as it sounds, like I always say though, the more of us that can start showing up and being like that and being who we are, we can make so many radical changes in this world when we start being who we are, instead of conforming to what everybody else says that we need to do. So, I really appreciate you guys being here on a Sunday and taking some time to be such a great audience. So if you want to find me, to connect with me, I'll be sending out an email to everybody. I've got a little free, challenge, if you will, that goes along with what we talked about on confidence, and also some style exploration. So I'll be sending that free guide out to you guys via email, also with a couple of other things. So you can always respond to that email. I'm on Instagram at Soul to Style. My website is soultostyle.com with dashes between the words. I'm on LinkedIn.
You can pretty much find me on any social media channel. And I had something else that I thought I was going to say there, and it completely just went out. So I don't know. I don't know if it was not important or what, but I want to open it up for anybody have any questions, burning thoughts that you've been holding on to.
Something that I resonated with when you were talking about
Couple things
like
here in the
wearing.
chat.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. Missy, can you hear me? Maybe Missy can't hear me. Hello?
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
The volume on my computer was down.
I was
My headphones, but I was like, wait, I can see that she's talking.
no worries. Something I resonated with was when you were talking about how one of the things that stops us from wearing something like maybe too colorful or out there is what will people think. So I have two older sisters, and I am 100% like the weird one. Like I like wearing really bright colors and patterns, and I'm not really great at matching things, and I don't usually have any sort of like sense of what's appropriate and not appropriate. Like, oh, I'm supposed to dress nicer for this event, and I didn't know that. And my sisters were always the ones who told me, like, Ava, that doesn't look good, that doesn't match, people are gonna think this, or people are gonna say that. And like, I feel like, I mean, obviously not on purpose, but they're the ones that kind of got me to the point of like getting more like self-conscious of what I'm wearing and like, does this match? And so instead of going out and shopping, especially once I started working too, because then I would get comments at work of like, oh, that doesn't really match. And I'd be like, oh no. So instead of going out and picking like the really bright, colorful stuff that I usually would go and pick out, like I've totally gone towards like more neutral. Like I'm wearing black right now. I never used to wear black ever. And I feel like I've like become that person as like a professional where like that's never who I was to begin with.
Uh, Thank you for sharing that. And I'll speak into that a little for you because usually, and I didn't really take time to touch on this in what we talked about, but usually that those people or some of the people that are closest to us that have, put those things in our mind, whether it's mothers, sisters, grandmothers, other female relatives, or very close friends. And so I think one of the things too that's really important is coming to terms with that they never meant to dull our shine. They were coming from a place of loving us and wanting to make sure that we were okay and we were safe, while also dealing with all of these same things themselves. So that's always something I like to kind of level set with, that is like those things come from the people that we love the most. And that, I think, sometimes is the hardest thing to start to reconcile with, that we can still have love for those people in our lives and also reject the thoughts that in beliefs that they gave us. Like both of those things can be true. And you know what? Like, who said everything has to match perfectly? Like, one of the things that I've discovered recently with my own style, because I do this stuff with myself, I check in with myself about every 6 months and kind of revisualize and reconnect and kind of make sure. And sometimes it's like, oh, yeah, I'm pretty much on the right track. Things feel really good. I don't need to get rid of a lot. And then there's other times that it's like feels like a little bit bigger of a shift. So I've been playing around with mixing and matching like patterns and like style stuff and things that, like, yeah, usually people are like, that doesn't go together. Like, why are you wearing that together? But when it comes from a place of feeling really aligned with who you are and you can own it, there's actually really fun things there. Like, I follow several people too that like on like Instagram and stuff that they wear stuff all the time that doesn't match, but somehow it just goes and it looks really cool. So thank you for sharing that, because I feel like that's just where we kind of all can get on that path of, okay, well, I want to look professional and I want to make sure, and if people are commenting about it too, like I want to make sure that people are taking me seriously. So like let me do all of these things. And yeah, you can get so far to the point, then you're like, well, wait, I'm not even really being who I am. And that's always then just doing a disservice to yourself, and it's doing a disservice to all the people that are around you. And it's also okay because we don't know what we don't know. So I'm just sending you so much like love, like with that.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely think I got into my head of like professional clothing is not colorful clothing. Like that's
Mhm.
not
Oh, and you can definitely bring those two together, for sure. All right, so we got another question in here. What are your thoughts on saying you can never be overdressed? Well, I love that saying because in most cases, that's very, very true, in my opinion. Now, obviously, if you're going to go out for a run, you're not wearing a ball gown or, like those kind of things. But I think sometimes we almost err on the side of dressing down so much because we don't want to hear like, "Ooh, what are you so dressed up for? Why are you so what?" And we've gotten so casual that even like I've even gotten that when I'm like just wearing like a summer like sundress or like I'm wearing jeans instead of like leggings. Not as much anymore because I think a lot of people that are around me now are used to the fact that I pretty much just always am like wearing something that looks a little bit more like put together. But I really don't think that you can ever really be too dressed up. It's just a matter of really leveling with the fact that, yeah, you might get some comments. Like if you decide to put on something that's a little bit nicer because it makes you feel good, you're probably also going to get some comments. And I feel like this is like the age old, like bully messaging or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's so true. When anybody is saying that to you, like, oh, like, what are you so dressed up? That is coming from a place that they are reflecting back to you how they're feeling, because they're feeling like, oh, she dressed up and I'm not dressed up enough. I didn't put in enough effort. Like I guarantee you 99% of the time that's where that's coming from. Did that answer the question? I think it's Eliza is the name, if I'm pronouncing your name right. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But okay, perfect. Anybody got anything else that they wanted to chat about? I think there was one that was kind of submitted maybe via an email, to be anonymous that I just remembered about. I believe around like body sizing and like when things are going to change, like when it comes to, particularly, this is not always the case. There can also be other instances where this happens, but where like, okay, like you get pregnant, obviously your body changes, and then postpartum is changing and all of that kind of stuff. As far as dressing with that. And that is it is definitely a challenging time to dress your body when you're in that space where like things are changing and in flux. And the biggest things there is staying true to yourself, still staying true to yourself and how you want to show up, and finding the things that are going to be really good at moving with your body sizes. So there's like a lot of really cool technology out there now with like denim, for example. And this would be probably more like postpartum that you would do this, because like I didn't wear jeans at all during my pregnancy. Like, no, thank you. I know there are some people that do, and I could never find any maternity jeans that worked well. But like once you get into that postpartum phase, there's so many cool companies at multiple different price points. Like I think Old Navy has them, and then you can get them in designer jeans too. But they have these like size span, if you will. Everybody has a different name for them, but they're jeans that fit multiple sizes. They're super stretchy. I have 2 pairs in my closet actually that I bought when I was at my largest, and I know that I'm definitely like I said before, I don't have my scale, but like I know with the way my clothes are fitting and new things that I've had to buy, I've changed sizes, I've lost a little weight, and these jeans still fit me. They fit me a year and a half ago and they still fit me now. So things like that, and investing in some of that kind of things really at any time, like those are good for like any time. but then also just finding things that, you know, are a little bit flowier, like maxi dresses and things like that, that are a little bit flowy, that still fit your like vibe that you're going for. Cause like staying true to that is always, always important. But there's a lot of those things that you can find. And then also be mindful of the investment, you know, invest in a few things that, you know, you're going to wear over and over again. And then once you're out of that size, you're not going to feel like you spent so much money on them that you can't get, you know, you can't get rid of them. So those would be some pieces of advice around that. So I wanted to make sure we touched on that. Anybody else have anything?
Are there, I have a question.
Yeah.
Are there, I didn't quite know how to type it up, but are there like with your clients any like major things that like people kind of overlook when they're trying to like change their wardrobe into something that like fits their personality more, where you're like, well, have you thought about this? And it's like, oh my gosh, this like all opens up, or that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Tell me how you say your name after you already went back on mute. Sorry.
Adalgisa.
Adalgisa?
Yeah.
That's a beautiful name. I love
you.
that. Yeah, so really honestly, the number one thing that is a common thread is learning how to wear things in different ways, because we kind of get really pigeonholed into, well, I'm trying to think of a good piece off the top of my head that like would be, we'll use a blazer as a good example, although this one I think is a little bit more commonplace now. But it's like, okay, like I wear my blazer jacket with my suit, and like that's the only way I wear it. But you can take that and then wear it in multiple different ways. You can dress that down and wear it with your jeans and your, you know, your graphic tee. You can wear it over a dress. You can do so many different things with it. I actually thought of a better example of that as I was talking, maxi dresses. Like I love a good like summer maxi dress, but if you live in a colder place in the country, like I do, Cleveland gets really cold. I don't want to wear my maxi dresses necessarily like by themselves, or even just with a jacket over them, but like there's ways that you can do, like putting a sweater over it and tying it so it's like a skirt with tights under it. So that versatility, like once people can start to see all of the possibilities of how to wear something, then they can take something that feels really, really good, and then they can wear it in multiple different ways, and then hopefully even multiple different seasons. And it starts to open up the possibilities of how to wear it, and also opens up the idea that your wardrobe doesn't have to be tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of things and this massive, massive investment. If you know how to wear things in multiple different ways and you aren't afraid to try like unique things and that kind of stuff with it. Does that answer your question? Awesome. All right. Anybody else? Going once, going twice.
Can
I'll
you
say
talk?
some. Oh,
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. Okay, I'll go. I just came on video too. I just wanted to really just say like thank you, and I think what you're doing now is like really important for just especially the time, because I'll just say with my experience, I'm definitely on a journey right now. I will say similar to what yours was very much. So I might have to reach out to you sometime to chat more. But I mean, I would say I kind of had, even before like COVID and stuff, I had kind of like a work uniform, so to say, that, you know, maybe I could have been a little bit more myself in, but it wasn't terrible. But nowadays, like I've been working at home since 2020, and I very much just wear leggings and a t-shirt every day. That is my new work uniform. And I've also gained some weight during that. So even on the weekends, like my clothes don't fit and I just buy stuff kind of to get by. And I've realized recently that it really that my clothes were really a creative outlet for me, and like not having that creative like everybody needs some sort of creative outlet. Maybe it's not through your clothes, but it was for me, and I was really have been missing that in my life. So I'm like trying to figure out like how to get back into it. So thank you for doing this. And I think it's really important, and because I'm sure there's other people like me who have gotten used to wearing you know, lounge clothes at home every day and kind of forgot how to dress up like they used to.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that. And you were most definitely not alone. I can guarantee you that. And the pandemic definitely did get a lot of us into that. Like, we just wear lounge clothes every single day. And it's just like the same example that I talked about with the ice cream that I realized. You're like, yeah, ice cream every meal sounds really, really great until you get into it a little bit and you're like, this is horrible. Like, I don't feel good. And it's a similar corollary,
I
but then
just,
it can be, oh, go
yeah.
ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I also joke that like I have like daytime pajamas and nighttime pajamas.
Yeah.
Like that's basically what my wardrobe is. I do change, thank God. I was always like, I need to change. I have to make a change. I can't just wear the same stuff, but they're basically pajamas. They're just different clothes that I wear during the day and different ones at night.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you're changing them. That's at least
Yes.
that's a good positive thing. Because but yeah, I mean, it's just with everything that we've all been through collectively and then individually over the last 3 years, you know, it's tough. And then when you add body changes in on top of that, it's like you can't just go back to wearing the things that you were wearing. And you've changed, like we've all changed. And that's the thing that I think is really important to emphasize too, that as you change, your wardrobe changes to reflect that. And like, that's okay. Not everybody's going to be Steve Jobs that wears like the same thing every single day so that he doesn't have to think about it. Like, that worked for him. Great. Man was a genius. And he also had a very creative outlet in what he did for his job. So like, I think that probably worked for him. But when you're wanting to be able to have that creative piece, it definitely can be hard when it feels like that got taken away. And when nobody else sees it. Like when you're like, I'm home, nobody else is seeing it. But what I want to leave you with this. You see you, and you are the most important person that sees you. So when you see yourself in any reflection on the computer screen or in the mirror, when you go into the bathroom or whatever, you see you. And that is arguably the most important person that sees you every day. So, but you're definitely not alone. We have somebody else that was trying to chime in at the same time. That was waiting?
I was going to, but I think you covered it.
Okay.
I think if there are no more questions, we can probably, any last minute questions? Awesome. Thank you, Missy, so much. I did just want to do a quick plug for our next event. It's going to be September 17th. Katie Shekshow is hosting one called When Engineering Meets Gaming. She's working in music background for video games. I'm sending out the mailing list link in the chat right now. So if you want to sign up for the next one, that will be in September. But thank you so much, Missy. I will eagerly be waiting for your email with all of those challenges and your info, and hopefully we can connect with you afterwards.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you all for taking an hour out of your Sunday to hang out with me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.